Welcome to the Udrcast, the social impact episodes. This series is Indigenous influencers, in essence, who are making great changes in the world and who have dedicated their lives to helping other people. Today, I am very honored to have a guest from the streets. And he is now the executive director of the Oxford Foundation, who does sober living for all people, but he specifically has a passion for the Indigenous population, and he's developed the initiatives within his organization to really serve the men and women of Indigenous background. And we have Earl Thiessen. How's it going, Earl?
It's going good. Thanks, Bill.
And how's your day today?
Good. 3 hours in from Edmonton, but yeah, this is important work, so.
Yeah, just doing it.
Going through the motions, buddy.
Yeah, I know. And I appreciate you being here. I know how busy you are, and coming right from Edmonton, probably went home, had a quick little, relax or something, and then got over here, and I appreciate you.
No, 100%.
Thank you for that. So yeah, I don't really know where I'm going to go today, but that's part of the fun of, I guess, life in the way that we live it, and that's the fun of the way that I run my podcasts. So tell the people what you do.
Well, now I am the executive director of the Oxford House. We're peer-supported recovery housing. I've developed a couple of models, but I'm also alumni. I was a resident. I was on the streets for 7 years, addicted for a quarter century due to all my childhood trauma. Mm-hmm. But I've dedicated my life to the service of others, right? And it's not work when you love what you do. Mm-hmm. It's stressful, it's taxing, it's tiring, and it's worth it. Mm-hmm. I've developed a couple of housing models. One that I'm very proud of. Both I am, but our peer and culturally supported Indigenous model and pre-treatment housing. Mm-hmm. It's the only licensed pre-treatment housing model in North America.
Is that right?
Yeah. It came from this guy from the streets, right? And it was from my own experience, sitting in detox, getting a treatment date 2 months down the road. Where am I going? Back to the street? Mm-hmm. Am I going to OD? Right? Am I going to end up in jail? So that's where that concept came from. But I feel blessed to be able. I fully believe that I made it through the multiple ODs, jail, alcohol poisoning, bullets whizzing over my head. I made it through all that to do what I do now and to sit here with you today.
Beautiful. You had mentioned, it's all worth it. All of the work and all of the pain that you've been through has been worth it. And it's been hard, as you said. Was there a time where you were working this path? Because as you know and I know, part of the recovery path is trying to be of service. Mm-hmm. In the early years of your journey of service, was it not worth it? And was it so hard that you didn't really enjoy it?
No.
No?
No. That's I don't even have to think about that answer. It's I was put here to do what I do, right? I had to go through all the pain and suffering that I did to fully understand the people that I'm serving right now. I fully believe that.
And so why I ask that is I know many people in recovery, and many of them do the service part of it grudgingly. They don't really want to do it. And some of them give up on it, and they don't do it, and the results are usually, not good. As you said, God has put you here, or Creator, or the universe has put you on this earth and had to go through what you had to go through so you could be doing what you do today, and you had to experience what the people you work with experience, so you understand. What has been the most hardest part to watch others go through and maybe not find the path?
The hardest part is when you can see in their eyes that they want it, but they don't know how to get it. I always say want and need are light years apart, but I can see the want in some people. They want it. They're just too scared to take that step, right? And for a lot of men, including myself, what kept me using for those decades was me not speaking about my sexual abuse as a man, right? As a freestyle wrestler for 6 years, as a senior football player, you don't tap your buddy on the shoulder and say, hey, you know what? That's not what happened for me, and I think it's a huge barrier. Some people, the shame is just too much, right? And they just can't come to terms that speaking about it is going to help them heal. Where I did, I was, a lot of people say rock bottom, like my partner was murdered in 2007. Yes, that really hurt. That wasn't quite rock bottom. For me, rock bottom is when I wanted to change. I needed to for 25 years. But when I wanted to change, sitting in the cell, waiting to see the justice of the peace, that was my rock bottom. I wasn't, and I had that discussion with myself. This isn't why I was put here. I wasn't put here to die on the streets, and I had a vision of one of the shelter doors saying memorial for Earl Thiessen, just like every other homeless person that passes away on the street. So I got honest for the first time with the JP and asked for help. And
you had tried recovery many times before?
Fifth time was the charm for me. When I went into every treatment center I went to was Indigenous based, but I wasn't. When I came to terms with my culture and started discovering the spiritual aspect, that's when my life changed.
So I know for me, and I know my story's different, and before we got on the air, I had mentioned, I really believe, and part of my ability to, so far at this point in my career, not get burnt out too much and make sure I stay grounded. And, I really believe that nothing happens in, let's say, God's world by mistake. And when I look at my life, my daughter Lucy's here, and I have a couple other daughters and my ex-wife, and my old life and the way that it was seemed really good. And my family had a decent life. And it seemed like I was making a lot of money and doing different things. But I'll tell you, through those years, anger was still very prevalent, and I was still violent. Never hurt my family physically, but I'm sure I hurt them emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And they would sometimes tremble when I would get home because I was in that mood, right? And Shannon's like, stay away from Dad. Let him watch the game. And she would go and play with the kids outside and keep them away from me. And that's no way to live, right? But that's, in many respects, those things happened a lot. But when I finally burnt down my life, and it seemed like it was the most terrible thing that had ever happened, which in many ways it was. It was the worst feelings I had ever had in my life. I hated myself. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. And I remember times driving up north, I wanted to drive into a semi or drive off a cliff, and I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I was wondering, how can I maybe do an insurance thing and kill myself where my family would still get the insurance. But I fucked up the insurance because of my addiction, so I lost my 15 years of life insurance policies, and so there would have been nothing anyway. But looking back, after a few years of sobriety, let's say 3, 4, 5, 6, and now, if I didn't go through what I went through and I didn't hit that darkness, I couldn't be effective in what I do today. So I really look at that had to happen that way. I had to be a shell of a human being to find that little light of hope in me, to follow that hope and then move forward and basically heal is what this journey has been. Yeah. But other people will look at that and go, that's very selfish perspective. What about your wife? What about your family? What about, and I understand that perspective, but I also look at it like this. I was teaching my daughters a lot of negative things. My wife wasn't healing. She was hurting because I wasn't, but they were secure financially. They had a roof over their head. But my view today is, my daughters see the spiritual path as the path to live. They also see that they have lessons to learn, and that the challenge of that life throws at them is the challenge they need to learn how to navigate, and they try to navigate it with Creator today. And so to me, it almost seems like they woke up and they're on their own journey, and maybe they don't fully wake up, but I have to be okay with whatever their journey is. And is that a cop-out? Or, so not everyone agrees with that. So for you, knowing you've been through, your wife got murdered, your mom went through residential school, you were basically in a gutter, ready to die. How do you look at that perspective that I just gave? Because I know for me, I'm super effective with the people I work with because of what I've went through. And how do you look at your life and what's happened? And, did these things not happen by mistake, or how do you look at that?
I think when I think about that, one, it amazes me that I made it through that, right? Suicide actually, the actual act of suicide never went through my head, but I was committing slow suicide anyways, right? To me, that's what alcoholism is. But I think Creator carved a really hard path that I had to make it through to be able to do what I do today, to look at people differently, because I was an asshole, right? I was subhuman. I just didn't look at people the same. You were, if I could get something out of you, and I carry, there's still guilt there. There's still shame there for the way I treated people. Mm-hmm. And I've made a lot of amends. There's ones that I can't. Jackie being one, right? Mm-hmm. But through prayer and ceremony, I know she forgives me. Mm-hmm. When I went into Sunrise, it took me, the last things we said to each other, I won't repeat. But then I went down to apologize to her, and she was gone.
Wow.
And I had to carry that with me. It took me about 6 months. I carried that with me, the guilt of not being able to say I'm sorry, right? And when I went into Sunrise, one of my friends who was in there, she said, Earl, when you were speaking in there, there was a light behind you, a blue light, and I fully believe that was Jackie with me.
Wow, dude.
Right, but I don't condemn myself for how I was. It was part of my journey, and it had to be that way. Mm-hmm. Right? Even with my two boys, my two older boys, they hardly even talk to me, right? And I get it. I understand. I was a deadbeat dad. I chose alcohol and I chose drugs over my children. And I'm the guy that has to live with that. But I know I can't change the past. So I don't wallow in it, mm-hmm. right? I call them my recovery kids, my children now, and I'm raising my niece. Right, from when my sister passed away, sister-in-law passed away, we took her in. She's 5 now. And I used to not look at that as a gift. Poor little Sarah, right? I didn't accept her as my child. I was pissed off at my sister, right? I was done having children. And then I get this little baby basically dropped on our lap, right? Me and my wife.
This Creator saying, you want to have that attitude here?
Yeah, something a little different. Now, she's my daughter. Mm-hmm. I'm dad. I got home from Winnipeg the one day after a few-day trip. She was sleeping, and I went and checked on her, and she got up, and she came up and started bawling. she came up, still half asleep, and grabbed my legs and said, "I missed you, Daddy. I love you." And that was it. that was it. She's my daughter. This poor little girl who doesn't have parents right now looks at me as her safety, her provider. And it really messed up my train of thought, right? Because I wasn't angry anymore, right? She's my baby, and she's going to be my baby until the day I pass away.
Wow. That's an amazing change of, I don't know if it's resentment, but some type of belief that you carried and judgment that you were carrying, and her love just melted it in that moment.
Gone, just like that.
That's so amazing. So a little bit more to your story, and why I want to go here is because you talked about I had to go through what I had to go through so I could understand what the people who I help, what they might have went through, and have that compassion and the passion to do what you do. And you had mentioned and I'm sure you've shared this, your wife got murdered on the streets. Your mom went through residential school.
She went through foster care.
Foster care.
6 to 16.
Did you have a father around?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So can you kind of bring us through like maybe a little bit of your childhood and what it was like, and maybe did you see symptoms of your mother's foster care, and was it real bad, and move us through up to what happened with your wife?
I grew up in a home that partied all the time, right?
Yeah.
I listened, and I just told my dad about this recently, probably within the past year. We heard everything, right? I don't know what parents think nowadays. We heard the arguing, we heard the partying, we heard the fights, we heard everything. And that, I believe, was the start of my childhood trauma, right? What was considered a spanking back in our day, they consider child abuse now. I don't hit my kids because I fully believe when you do that, maybe a little extreme, something happens to that child, the trust, maybe the fear, and the child has to carry that, and that's what I did. Right, I took my anger out on the wrestling mat, and people from my era, you would get people all the time saying, "Oh, you just like rolling around on the mat with boys," and I said, "Well, let's go roll on the mat. I'll show you what it's about." Right, but it was a lot of drinking my whole life. Right, when I was 13, my first blackout drunk was when I was 12, right? And I woke up in a riverbank, and my friend and my ex carried me back into the house.
Did you grow up on a nation?
No. I grew up in Saskatoon and in Calgary. But I didn't feel any pain. I didn't feel any shame when I drank. And that's what it was about for me. And then when I was 13, I was drunk and blacked out, and that's when I was sexually assaulted. I couldn't tell anyone. I carried that until I was doing my step 5 in Sunrise.
How many years later was that?
That was about 24 years later.
Wow.
I only told my dad about 3 years ago because I didn't want him to think that he wasn't there to protect me, right? Because it happened when I was living at home.
What did you think about yourself the days following that sexual assault? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, I felt gross, dude. I felt it was just disgust in myself that I carried that, saying this was my fault. I put myself in that situation, right? And then I'm questioning, did I deserve that? Did I set this dirty old man up for success. You know what I mean? I carried that for a long time, and then I would drink to black it out because it's such a shameful feeling. I mean, everyone who's sexually assaulted, I'm sure, feels the same way, but in my mind, being that athlete and a male, it just, the perspective was a little bit different for me, right? The ultimate thing was shame and embarrassment, right? And that's why I never told anybody.
Yeah, dude.
And it fueled my alcoholism, just to black out. If I was blacked out, I didn't think about it.
You know, I was partying hard as a teenager too, and I was a blackout drunk, like probably at least 95% of the time. And even when I came into recovery, it took me probably 4 to 5 years before I shared this with my mentor. And I rarely talk about it still, but I have talked about it more in the last couple of years than I have in the first 8. I'm in my 10th year. And similar to you, but different than you, I was sexually assaulted by a friend when I was 16 or 17, and I woke up similar to you. And dude, and why I asked how you felt is because while you were sharing your story, I know how I felt, and you described how I felt, and I questioned whether I was gay. I just felt like I don't even know what I felt. I just felt gross, and I hid that. The thing about these things is you can't really hide them, right? They're there, and they affect every decision and move that we make for the rest of our lives until it's released. And 4 years into my sobriety, I finally told my mentor, and then subsequent mentors since then. And then finally I started sharing it. This is where it really started paying off. Started sharing it with other men who I was helping that had similar things happen. And I really believe Creator knows where I'm broken and knows what I need to help heal. And he's going to send me the people that have similar experiences so that I can use my story to share. So, yeah, I'm probably not as far along as you in that, but not many people
Speaking is
know.
healing, and that was the catalyst for me. As soon as I got it out, I just felt such relief, right?
Who'd you get it out to first time?
It was an elder in an Indigenous lady in Sunrise. When I scripted my step 4. Scripted, I'll say. My step 4 to what I was willing to divulge. And I walked into that ceremony room, and we smudged, and just the switch went off, right? I sat in her room for 2.5 hours just crying. And I walked out of her room. You know, we burnt my step 4. It was meaningless. It had some truth to it, but not... I didn't divulge the deep, dark secrets that we hold in that bring us out to use time and time again. But we burnt that, and I walked out of that room, and I knew my life changed. Right there, I knew my life had changed by getting that off my chest finally, right after carrying it. And I know that was the reason I went through treatment 5 times. I never talked about it.
Did you know you have to talk about it, or was it partially something to do with this elder that...
I think it was my change in myself. Who am I protecting? This guy was like probably 70 years old when it happened. 25 years earlier, he's not here. I'm not protecting him. And in my mind, I forgave him because he was sick, right? And I forgave all the people that did harm to me. I'm not forgiving them for them. I'm forgiving them for me so I can move on. Right? That might sound distorted, or selfish, but that's the way it worked for me. I had to forgive them so I could move on with my life and be able to speak about it. When I speak about my story and Jackie being murdered and me finding my mom's body, Amy passing away, Sarah giving me a fatherly awakening. All of that, it brings tears to my eyes because it hurts. But, and my wife said, if it hurts so much, why do you keep speaking about it? Because people need to hear it. People need to hear it. Because then it validates that it's not wrong to speak about that. You can speak about it. Like you said, it's the right person, right? You don't just blurt it out to anybody. Mm-hmm. It's that right person. And when I was doing my step 5, it was me, the elder, and creator. Right.
And I would assume the elder had no judgment. How did she handle that?
No judgment whatsoever. She hugged me. She knew, I think, what I was talking about, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sure she had her own experiences, and she'd probably listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's stories. And I think the look on her face, she was very welcoming. She made me feel very comfortable. Mm-hmm. Comfortable enough for me to speak about it for the first time, right? There was no judgment, right? There was understanding and kindness. And that's what allowed me to move forward.
And that's the key to being a listener. The thing with being a listener and not having judgment is you have had to have done a lot of work on yourself to have not have judgment, right? Yeah. I work in the penitentiaries, and when I first got there, guys were pretty skeptical, man. And then I've heard many stories of how prison works, and I know why they're skeptical. And I've just been authentic and real. And today I have a lot of men that want to see me. They're waiting for me every Thursday and Friday, and they can't wait to see me. And then we get into these sessions where it's just me and them, and some of the things that I've heard. And I don't judge them, and I let them talk, and I ask them questions, and they cry. And if these men were seen crying outside in general population, that's not good for them, right? It shows weakness when really it shows strength. And so I let them do that because I know, man, and the minute you feel judged, you clam up again, and then you don't speak it, and then we get sicker, and the shame and the guilt gets worse, and then everything just goes sideways again. So, it's, I don't know if it's a skill, but I think it's definitely a sign of our own journeys of healing. And the job that you have and the work that you do, you have to have that, or you wouldn't be effective. You'd be running a military type of operation there. And I know that because I work with the guys in your houses, and I know they love you, and I know that typically the community of people that you have around you are of that nature, and I can see that and I can feel it. And when I go to those houses to try to talk with the guys, they're there, man. They have nothing bad to say. They're not resentful at Oxford, or you know what I mean? Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful skill. It's a beautiful heart that you have. You'd mentioned your wife again, your mom's body. And I don't want to pry on all the seemingly terrible things. We want to talk about good things too. But these are experiences that really woke you up, and maybe they broke you down first. And sometimes they got to break us down. Well, what was another one that really broke you down that you didn't know what to do?
My mom was extremely difficult. I was her caregiver for the last 3 years of her life. And I run this through my head all the time. If anybody could help her, it would have been me. I could get her into detox. And that's why I say want and need are light years apart. My mom didn't want it.
Full-blown alcoholic?
She brought that decade of her life from 6 to 16 to the spirit world with her. And I asked my dad what happened, and he said, she never told me. Mm-hmm. So I could only imagine. We've all heard the stories what happened in that decade, right? But that's Mom, right? That's a son's first love, should be, is their mom. So
Good relationship with her?
yeah, everything was good. I do carry a little bit of guilt because I wouldn't allow my kids over there if she was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
My mom drank all the time. So my kids would see her maybe 2-3 times a year. So I do, but I was protecting my kids. I'm trying to break the cycle, right? But that was, and when I was driving down there, I'd gotten back from a conference out in Ontario, and I called her, no answer. I said, okay, well, mom's drunk. And then the next day, the pharmacy called me and said, we tried to call your mom to get her meds because I was her caregiver. I took care of everything. Mm-hmm. And she's not answering her phone. So I said, okay, I'll go check it out. And I was driving down Memorial Drive, coming same way I came here. She lived in King Tower. And I said to myself, please let mom be okay. And I got an answer. And it said, she's with us now. And I got a knot in my throat, and my stomach sank, and that fear kicked in, right, of what was going on. And I drove there, and I said, if mom's Meals on Wheels are on her door, she's gone. And I walked around the corner, and her Meals on Wheels were hanging on the door.
No way, bro.
And I just... the panic and care, concern, everything just kicked in, and I had a key for her door. I opened it up, and I saw her walker there. And I could smell it, right? I used to work at the Baker House. I found about half a dozen bodies there. That's not a smell that goes away. So I knew right away, and I walked around the corner, and there she was, face up, passed away, and that was it. I was just crushed. But through my healing process, I didn't react, right? I responded. I covered her up and gave her a kiss. Mm. And then I called my wife. That was my first call, was my wife. And she had just learned how to drive. But she came down. I called 911, and everything just happened so quick. But a lot of people were worried that I was going to use. Right? Mm-hmm. That was the furthest thing from my mind. How is my mom dying of alcoholism? How is me drinking honoring that? And that's what I tell a lot of people that lose their loved ones. Honor that person by staying clean and sober. Mm-hmm. Right? But that was probably one of the most difficult times of my life, right? In my recovery. I don't think they're tests. They're lessons.
And why was it so difficult? Did you guys have a really good mother and son bond, or was there just so much compassion because of the struggle that she went through that she never got to live the vitality of life that you wished for her, and it was like deep sadness?
I think it was a bit of both, right? It was more sadness. I knew my mom was gone. I knew I wouldn't be able to hug her again, to give her a kiss, to bring her a Timmy's, it was just done, right? And when I gave her eulogy at her funeral, and I said what was written down, we talk about the scripted, and then I had a meltdown, and I was standing up there. And I said what was really on my mind. I told everybody, I said, my parents said to me when I was homeless and drunk and addicted that they wanted one thing. They wanted to have one thing before they left this world, and that was to see me change my life and get clean and sober. And my mom got her wish. Mm. And saying that just released a lot of the feelings, the little bit of guilt that I couldn't save my mom. My mom had to want it to be saved in order to, we know that. Mm-hmm. but that was gone after I said that. So, and that's the unscripted part of life that I think really helps the people that we serve understand that being genuine and speaking from the heart ourselves helps people find themselves and helps them along on their journey and helps them to relearn trust. Right? When I was a support worker and I would interview people, I would tell them some of my story right away. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You could just see them, their shoulders slouch a little bit. The relaxation kicks in a bit, the comfort, and I guess the beginning of trust starts. And then they're ready to open up. I fully believe that speaking is healing.
Is your mom full blood?
Yeah.
Cree? Blackfoot?
Cree. From Saskatchewan, yeah. Makwasigaken First Nation. I'm the first one in my family to get a status card.
No.
And when I got
She didn't even have one?
No. When I got my Indian registration number, it came to my office. I had to shut my door, and I sat there and cried. Because that, for me, was honoring my mom, our people, our culture. That's what that meant to me. I didn't get it for 14 cents a liter off gas or cheap smokes, right? I got it to honor my mom. It meant the world to me.
We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARDLIFE and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast. And there's a thing that I've noticed as I work with, I'm just going to say it like this, just to make it simple. I work with white people. I work with Indigenous people. White people aren't just white people, right? But my point is, when I work with Indigenous people on a one-on-one basis where I'm trying to help them with the malady, I'm trying to help get through the things why they drink, trying to navigate the proper conversations in the right way. And sometimes seems not compassionate, I'm going to say sometimes. But I think as I do this work intuitively, sometimes I got to push. I got to have a little pull. I got to be compassionate. And everything I do is based on love, but I might have to challenge them because I need to get something out of them. And as I navigate these paths of trying to break through the ego, and when I say ego, I mean the parts of the psyche that have edged God out. And when I mean ego, I mean the absence of love. It's fear, it's guilt, it's shame, self-hatred, no self-worth, and all of the things that make up the ego, absence of love. And Indigenous people, it's like a concrete wall of pride and protection and fear and pain and trauma. And if you know anything about concrete hardens with age. It cures over time. There's two kinds of concrete. There's structural and non-structural concrete. Non-structural is like a sidewalk. You can hit that with a sledgehammer and you can break through it fairly easy. Structural concrete is what they use in foundations and building walls. That stuff is thick and hard. And with Indigenous people, the pain and the trauma of the ancestors too. Not only was it your mom, it's her ancestors, right? And because of her age and never having the ability and never having an opportunity to probably really work on it, that concrete gets harder, the pain gets harder, and it's harder to chip through to the point where she couldn't make a decision to work through it because it had her. And as I work with Indigenous people, sometimes I'm like, this is a hard one because it might be too thick. their protective mechanisms and the pain is so thick that I can't possibly chip through that hard concrete. But if we can get them while they're younger, I've noticed, and have the right teacher, it works much more effectively, much more often. So these older people, they just don't have any choice. They don't know what else to do. And alcohol and drugs are the solution for their life. And many times it doesn't even work anymore, but they don't know what else to do. And they can't get through that concrete. And that's what I see probably what happened with your mom, right? She wasn't going to make the choice because her psyche wouldn't let her. There was too much pain and she's protecting herself too much.
I agree.
Right?
Yep.
And, I didn't grow up Indigenous. I grew up white. Look at me. I'm as Indian looking as they come. But when I grew up, I didn't want to be Indian. I remember trying to wash my skin off. And, one of my family members said, you're going to have a hard time in life because you're Indian. And I was little and I didn't understand this stuff. And people would make fun of me and judge me. And people would say things when I played hockey on the ice. And, I didn't want to be Indian. And then I spent my whole life, when I look back now, I spent my whole life trying to be white, following the other path. I didn't even know an Indigenous person in my life until I was 43 years old. If they would talk to me, if my brothers and my relatives talked to me in my life on the streets or at a bar or at the store, hey brother, how's it going or whatever, I would not talk to them. And then finally I came into my own recovery and I found this path and I got to know people and I got to find out who I was. A big part of that's I'm Indigenous, right? So along your journey, you didn't have any culture in your life. You grew up in the cities. You're influenced by, a lot of, non-native people and society. And how did you grow up like that? Did you feel like you didn't want to be Indigenous or did you interact with them or like?
My mom never identified as Indigenous.
Exactly.
She even told me, she said when she was young, she would tell people that she was part Japanese,
right.
And that's why her skin was dark and her eyes were slanted.
Wow.
Right? And that broke my heart, right? I'm proud to be Indigenous, right?
Even back then when your mom would say that?
I was just Earl. I didn't even pay attention to anything like that. I was so ashamed of all of my trauma and everything that being white, black, East Indian, it didn't matter to me. I was just existing, basically, going through the motions as a kid, right? And then speaking with my mom, her sister, same thing. She looked like dark skin. She's Indigenous. They're all Indigenous, right? And then it started to dawn on me, right? I was starting to get curious as to why there was so much shame and embarrassment about being Indigenous, right? And then as I got older, and it was later, I didn't recover till I was 37. But even on the streets, even when I was homeless, I was always hanging around with the Indigenous people, and they would call me white because I'm not as dark skinned, right? My eyes are hazel, and Jackie would actually protect me, and then she'd go, "He's Cree," and I don't even know if that was better because most of them are Blackfoot, so she's kind of getting me in trouble. But and then there was more. I was more welcome, right? Until they started getting drunk. Then I turned into the white guy. So it was tough, but now when people say that you're an Indigenous leader, I'm so proud. And right away my mind goes to my mom, my ancestors, right? My nephew, my niece, my sister, they're all going after their identity. I'm going to get my kids, I guess now it's 3 generations down you can go, and then that's it for the bloodline. Like, how is that possible? There's always going to be Indigenous blood in our people. How can you say that you're done? 3 rounds, you're done, right? It's not a sweat lodge, man. So that and that's hurtful, because I take such pride in identifying and being and practicing, and it's just such a shame that there's so few of us left now that in I guess you would say the urban cities, right? There's just so few of us left that it kind of worries me that the bloodlines of our people is just going to be gone and eliminated one day. Because that's what's happening in my family. And, I'm with a non-Indigenous girl, right? If my daughter is with a non-Indigenous man, it's just gone. That's it. What is going to happen? Right?
So when we look at our people across the board and how not well a lot of us are, you were hanging out downtown. 50% of the population downtown, back then it was probably higher, is Indigenous, homeless people addicted to drugs or alcohol. Today it's probably close to 50, I don't know, 40% maybe. I know in the prisons it's the 30 to 50% of whatever prison is Indigenous. And we have like a tiny bit of the Canadian population, but we our numbers are high in all the areas they shouldn't be high, which is a symptom of, us not being well. So when you look across the board at, what we need or what's wrong, what is wrong? When I'm in prison and I see all these guys in prison and I hear their stories and they're getting punished for the ramifications of residential school and different types of genocide over 500 years, these guys are the result of that. It's hard for me to put the blame on them, although I need them to take personal responsibility for their life and what they've done, but it's just like it's all backwards. And then they're punished more in prison. I see it constantly. But I also work in First Nations communities. I got a call from a place up in Northwest Territories the other day, one in Ontario, and I'm going to go visit these places. And it's the same thing everywhere I go. It's just a little different depending on what that community's like, right? But I have my opinion on what I think is wrong and maybe what part of the solution is, which is many years in the making. What do you think is wrong and what can we do?
I don't, it's not so much for me what's wrong. It's the opportunities that aren't there for our people. And that was one of the big reasons, because I was an Indigenous men's home in Oxford House. 0 cultural support. 5 Indians in a house, it's an Indigenous home, let's get some grant money, right? And that's not the right way to do it. When I recreated the model, there has to be cultural support there, like you and your dad do, like Elizabeth does, like Hal does. There has to be cultural support. There has to be that reconnection. And it doesn't have to all be Cree or Blackfoot. We're one people. Well, we are under God's eyes, one people, but for the Indigenous aspect of it, bringing everybody together, learn each other's culture, heal together in a safe environment where you're not judged, right? I remember as a support worker, people saying, oh, this guy's fucking smudging in the house and the whole house smells like pot. I said, dude, if you think sweetgrass smells like pot, you need to go back to treatment, right? But that's part of the reason why I wanted to have a strictly, and there's non-Indigenous people in the Indigenous homes, right? We can't really leave the beds open, but I prefer if it's a non-Indigenous person. If you're willing to practice the spiritual aspects and cultural aspects of the home, come on in, right?
100%.
But that's the whole purpose of me recreating that model. And now we have 5 homes in the province, right? Most of them are always full, but you see when people are coming to sweats, you've seen it when you talk to people. Their eyes are wide open, right? They're proud to be Indigenous in that moment, and hopefully they're around long enough and they practice long enough where when they leave the house that pride doesn't leave and just go back. We have to break the cycle, right? The cycle needs to be broken. There's so many brilliant Indigenous people out there. We just need to give people the opportunity to heal and have that proper support for them to heal. And safety and trust has to be there, because safety and trust was taken away from us hundreds of years ago. We need to provide a place that is safe, where they can learn how to trust and be proud of who they are. And that's the whole concept behind that model. And that it brings brings pride to me, knowing that I'm doing what I can, even though I didn't grow up with any spiritual or cultural connection. I had to relearn all that. I'm still learning, but to provide that opportunity for other people is a blessing.
And consistency, I always find in anything that I do in recovery, including in the working with nations and the programs that I try to get the nations to bite into, it's about consistency over time. How do you see consistency work within what you're doing? And is it important?
It's vital, and that's where we can't give up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I fully believe that healing homes is what I call them. These healing homes need to be on the government's allotted First Nation land, the reserves, right? I said that at the Recovery Capital Conference when I said that. It's all our land. That's the Indian coming out in me, right? This is all our land. But on our plotted areas, on the reserves, we need to have healing homes for families, for men, for women, however you see that healing happening. And I gave the single parent family model to Frog Lake First Nation. They brought me up there, and it was chief and council sat at the table with me, right? I was just so proud of being Indigenous, and so proud of my journey, and so proud that I was being welcomed into the community, right? I felt at home. But I gave them the single parent and family housing model, and they have a home open up there now, and there's a family living in that home. That's what we need to do. It's not, Oxford House hasn't even opened up that model yet. That's what the intention was. But it's not mine. It's like pre-treatment housing or Indigenous. It's not mine. It's for everybody who wants the healing. Yeah. So I felt great pride in handing that over. Here's the manual. Here's the flash drive. It's yours. That's what needs to happen everywhere.
So I'm working with like these nations that I'm talking about. There's 2 in BC that are side by side. One of my mentees is working on the nation next door under my direction, and then I'm working for the one I've been working for coming up on a year here. And I pitched consistency. I pitched trust building, relationship, planting seeds. And it's not me come in for a workshop for a couple days and leave and you don't see me again. I need to be there consistently, even on the holidays, holiday Monday, whatever days it is that I'm supposed to be there, I try to be there. Because the minute somebody doesn't think you're there for them, the walls go up and you're pushed away and they're back into their issues. But I've been really lucky. I've had this one nation really buy into what I've said, and she's really seen the difference. And I met Chief and Council for the first time. They finally wanted to meet me, and I didn't really want to meet them because I'm working under the radar. But I also believe that I have to help influence Chief and Council. And one of the biggest things I see with me doing the work out on the nations everywhere is they don't have the healing home to come to. And that's huge. But with the healing home, you need a community of healed people or people on the healing journey. And with some of these houses that I hope that will happen in these nations, there's only like one person, maybe sober. They don't know anything about the culture, but that's our job to put these pieces in place, and maybe that one guy, but be consistent, not give up on the model after a year because you've only gotten 2 people in there and one of them relapsed and there's only one. Well, it's a waste of money. We can spend the money on these workshops. No, be consistent. Let this go for 5 years. Try it out. So, and the reason I'm bringing some of this up is because I'm really bringing some good things to these nations, and I want to try to help them. And I might suggest what you just did for Frog Lake. You'd be okay with that?
100%.
I know you would.
I'd hand you the manual and a flash drive, Bill.
Okay. Yeah. So what I see as the solution is consistency. These healing homes, they have to be done. I know that a lot of our workers are trained not to share their personal experiences or journey with the people they work with. To me, that's the key to it all. I have to share. So, when I work with these mental health workers and they're like, no, I'm not supposed to share my experience. I'm supposed to really set these boundaries. And I'm like, it's kind of like counterproductive to what we're actually doing. And I can't really tell them what to do. And then the other thing I'll say about this whole scenario is I see the drug and alcohol addiction problem and spiritual sickness problem getting worse. And it's like, okay, why is it getting worse? And I know you're not a big fan of, calling out the government. I'm more of that guy. I think our systems are producing the sickness. And until we get a high level view and a change of perception on what we're doing with the systems, and they stem from our governments, man. We're not going to reduce what's happening. It's only going to get worse. And I understand, a government guy patting himself on the back saying we're releasing 300 more beds, which we need. But the last thing we need to do is pat him on the back and say thank you when part of the problem is their direction that they don't have full control over either. And I'm not blaming them. They're producing it. It's like, how do we reel it in way at the back? Very, very difficult thing to do.
Well, that's how all the trauma started in the beginning. To start with, was the government, right? That's why we're sitting in this situation, right? You got to move the needle somewhere, right? So, and I get this. I understand that. It really pisses me off when I dig into history and I see what was done. And that's why I said at that conference in front of everyone, this is all our land. People have to realize that this isn't, it's just backwards how it is. This is where you guys are going to stay. This is where we're going to move you. This is the treaty rights we're going to give you. No, man. There was very little of anything what's going on now back when our people were self-sufficient and alone, right? If somebody committed a crime or did something wrong, the community wrapped around them and held them accountable and gave them tasks to make up for their shortcomings. Now they're throwing us in jail, right? That's why I'm a huge supporter of Indigenous court. Right? I need to get a hold of Karen again because some of the stuff that's happening with criminal justice and everything, there needs to be a change in that, because all we're doing, you said it, all we're doing is punishing and repunishing and putting our people right back into the same spot where they're coming from. There has to be, and I've gotten myself in trouble saying this a lot of times before, don't just give chief and council money and say, fix this.
100%, bro.
That's not the way to do it. Why don't you give the money to a collective in the community, not chief and council, and have them make the plan for the healing?
Like group conscience type of.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was saying about the interview process, getting everybody in the organization, do that. You give chief and council money, something's going to go awry, we'll say, right? It's not all going to end up where it's supposed to be. It's going to get misallocated. It's for the people. Give it to the people.
Yeah, and as I'm mentioning communities that aren't well, I'm talking also about chief and council and leadership, right? Like, I think some of the programs I want to, and have tried, I'm like, this is for your chief and council first. This is for your administration. Yeah, I can give it to the people. But if you guys aren't healed at the top of this hierarchy system, then it doesn't filter through properly. You guys need to take the course. You guys need to do the healing. You 5 chief and council members need to commit to your own journey. And maybe it's, sobriety testing, P testing, Chief Alexis from Alexis Nation up by Edmonton. From what I've heard, he's implemented a full, abstinence chief and council and administration. So they P-test these people every so often. And dude, this guy's an amazing leader, and he's doing things that shake up, the system. But he's doing a great job, and it's working because he loves his people. He loves the land, and he's really, from the top down, things are changing, right? That's what we need. We need more of that, and that's hard to find.
He's decolonizing.
He is.
Right?
He is. Another thing that I'd like to say before we go on the wrap-up end of this podcast is, when I look at nations, I look at the sicknesses, I look at what the struggles are, I look at what the solutions are, I look at where it's coming from, government, history, and how we've been treated. And I don't want to sit here and slam the government. That's not what I'm about. Although sometimes I feel like it. And I think politics are a low vibrating entity. I study levels and laws of consciousness, and I know that politics is not a spiritual entity, typically. But of course, certain entities within that system, the people who work in it, they can be spiritual, and they can change the entity of what it actually is. And so what you've done, at least for me, is you've given me inspiration, because I've watched you be a spiritual man, being of service, dedicating your life to what you do, and you're able to influence people and navigate this without pissing everybody off, by staying calm, by building relationships, and making changes in a really positive way. And there was times on my journey so far where I don't know if that was going to be possible for me because of my rigidness and my wanting to blame the government for producing the sickness. And I think that you've given me hope that I can change a little bit of my approach and become an influencer in a good way, and maybe change, because our system's set up in politics. But you're showing me that spirituality can be brought into an entity that's not spiritual typically. And it can happen, and change can happen. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. There's always a way. Government supported our Indigenous program for 2 years. I'm working on it right now to get it for another 2 years. It shouldn't be for 2 years. It should be permanent. That's what and that about the provincial government, because the provincial government is doing is funding our program for our Indigenous homes. When the higher level of government is the one that's supposed to be doing that. I read Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action 21 when I did that hearing at the federal government. I closed with it because it's the federal government. It's part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to actions that they are supposed to support existing and new healing lodges. That's what we have at Oxford House. Other organizations have them. Where the hell is the federal government? You know what I mean? It's and I'm not, kissing ass to the provincial government, but it's just a fact. I had to get the funding from them because I couldn't get it from anywhere else.
And they're stepping
It's
up.
It's time for the federal government to get their shit together and step up and help provide some support for our people to heal. There's still water issues, dude. Come on, what the hell is this,
Yeah,
man?
dude.
Right? It just blows my mind.
Here we are in Calgary in a water ban because of the big water pipe that broke there a couple of weeks ago. And all I can think about is how many nations don't have water. And we're crying about having to, keep our taps off a little bit. And we have no idea what it's like to live like that.
That's, to me, a nation not having clean drinking water is an embarrassment on behalf of the federal government.
100%.
Because that should be first and foremost the first step to health. Right? That's why I always say when you're coming into healing, eat, nourish your body, so you can. Then you're not thinking about that, right? When you're on the streets or you're in jail, and you don't have any canteen, you're struggling to eat enough. So get your body healthy first, then get your spirit. And I always say you heal all aspects of the medicine wheel. That's my version, my understanding of holistic healing is the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of your life. You need to heal all four. You can't do two. I tried that. I tried that 5 times, 4 times. 5th time was a charm when I actually took a look at myself and realized my spirit was sick. My mental and emotional was definitely sick. My physical was, I was 132 pounds when I went into treatment, right? So it was my spiritual, that really, the spiritual aspect and my reconnection to our culture that helped save my life. And I tell everybody, you have to heal and work on all 4 aspects, right? And that's what has to happen. How can you start healing if you don't even have clean drinking water? Man, it's just ridiculous. It pisses me off.
2 more points. 1, how do we get chief and councils to buy into their own healing journey as a chief and council and into the administration staff of that chief and council? What do we say? What do we do? How do we get them to say, you know what, we're going to take responsibility for our healing as your leaders, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this transformational workshop that's a week long. We're going to book ourselves into this. We're going to do this with you guys. Like, how do we get that happening?
That unfortunately starts at the top, right? It's every nation is different, right?
Yeah.
I went out to Sutina and I sat down with council, with Hal, talking about that healing home. And I think I might have insulted them because of what I said, that the nation needs to support that initiative for a healing home. You're not helping your own people, blah, blah, blah. They ended up saying, yeah, the meeting's over, you can leave, right?
Yeah.
But when I went to Frog Lake, it was a totally different feeling because chief and council had asked their one member, Roxanne, who's an alumni of Oxford House. They started the initiative, right? It's speaking about that, I need to contact them again, but they started that initiative. They inquired about the healing homes. They requested that she connect with me and bring me up to the nation. And that's beautiful. So it's all on chief and council, but for some nations, if it's a colonial system that they're getting on chief and council, they're elected. If they're not going to support the initiative and the health of the community, why are you electing them as leaders? You know what I mean? It's backwards. If they're not helping the nation, don't vote for them. And get somebody in there that is actually there to help the nation. I know it's easier said than done because this has been going on for generations and generations. But to me, that's if the chief and council aren't there following through with these initiatives, they shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
And you get voted in.
And so maybe it's okay. You get shut down in one place and another place embraces you, and all we can do is help one person at a time. One person, one family, one community at a time, and maybe that community is ready. And the chief and councils are ready, and so they're doing something different. And maybe in 50 years, maybe there's a few more bought in. And, this process of healing with our communities it's many years in the making, right?
Even Stony Nakota, they have that treatment center they just opened up there. I toured that. That's beautiful. That's action, right? That's helping your people heal, right? And they're saying, well, it's just a bunch of trailers put together. And I walked in there and I thought, there's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah.
It's safe. It's secure.
It's loving.
It's a place for people to heal. Exactly.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with it.
No.
Good on them. I was so happy.
Yeah, dude, it's beautiful. And then lastly, and why I'm going to bring this question up to kind of finish off with is because as I speak with all these different health workers, health directors, and the odd council member and various types of workers, sometimes they get really discouraged, like they're banging their head against the wall and they're getting nowhere. The people they're helping aren't getting well in many respects sometimes. But I think more so than that is the funding or what they do gets shut down. They don't have enough workers and they get really frustrated and they don't know what to do and they don't want to quit their job because they need it and they love helping the people. And basically what I'm saying is for an organization or an administration staff or, for council members who maybe don't agree with the chief and council's decisions, what do you say to them to not give up and to keep fighting a good fight or keep loving good love or whatever it might be? And if you could answer that for these organizations and look in that camera and say, this is what you do.
For me,
Yeah.
the way I see everything is if you help change one person's life out of 1,000, that's success. Because that one person is going to talk to another person or another 1,000 people, and one person. You can't give up. If this is a really hard sector to be in. This is very, very difficult. It's emotionally taxing, all of that. When you love what you do, you love your people, you love your culture, you just have to keep moving forward because that one success story, for me, one success story erases anything negative that has happened. Knowing that single mother is going back to get her children, that erases everything that's success. That's the way I see it, right? And it is difficult because you can't undo generations of trauma in 30, 60, 90 days, right? You know as well, it's not a destination, it's a journey, right? I've been in this sector for 15 years now, right? And I still love what I do. It's not work. I've burnt out. I've come close to feeling defeated, right? My wife said, Earl, this isn't, if you leave the organization, it's not about the organization. It's about the people you serve. It's about that homeless person that needs to hear your story, that recovery is possible. We have to keep telling our story. People need to hear it. And for people that are on their healing journey that don't share that, that's where the issue is. Talk about it. Who's judging you? There's only one person that can judge me, right? That's the way I look at it. You can't stop what you're doing because that one person out there is waiting to hear your story.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think I'm going to wrap her up here. Where can our viewers and our listeners, see you, see more of you, find more of you?
Well, I see it. It's funny because it sounds egotistical. It's not at all. Google my name, right? It's hilarious. I Google my name and there's bad stories on there about me. And I'm going, where was I when this happened? Right? But that's the best way I can say, right? Is look up my name, and it's not about me. It's about the journey, the path. I love talking. I hand out more cards to homeless people than I do to professionals, right? Because people need to hear the stories of success, right? Or what society deems as success. I'm just on a healing journey,
right.
And I've been blessed enough to be put in this position. Never did I ever think that I would be executive director of Oxford House, right? I was a resident 16 years ago, and here I am, doubling the budget, tripling the staff, developing housing models. Yeah. Pre-treatment housing is massive, right? Indigenous housing is massive. And anyone, as long as they're not looking to make a profit off of those suffering, I would give them everything that I know.
Beautiful.
Free. No problem. Here it is. Help your people. Yeah. Help someone.
So yeah, if you're a chief and council or you're an organization and you're working with housing and you want some results and you want what Earl has, you can get a hold of him. He's at the Oxford Foundation in Calgary. You can Google him. You can find him in many videos and all over the place. This guy's been around helping people for quite a long time. He knows my dad very well. My dad is in his 70s, and my dad talks highly about Earl. My dad's been in the addictions field for over 40 years. And you've even helped my brother, right? You've tried to help him numerous times. And my brother's doing really, really good right now.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really, really nice to see. And
yeah, tell him I said hi.
I will. I love my brother. I miss my brother. And there's many years of both of our addictions that kept us separate. But Earl, I want to thank you for doing what you do and keep doing good things. And, one day in the future, I'd like to have you back again and hear more of your story or hear more of what you do or more advice that you can give me to navigate a spiritual path in the political realm. Thank you, my friend.
100%. Thanks, Bill.
Hey.
Hey.